morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Suchitra Pillai, your host for today. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Dun Bradstreet CtrlS India's Top 500 Companies 2021 virtual conference. For more than 2 decades, Dun Bradstreet has been organizing this event as a tribute to the Indian corporate sector, and especially to India's top 500 companies who epitomize the driving force of the Indian economy. These top 500 companies have consistently grown faster than the Indian economy over the past 21 years, and they contribute to nearly 16% of India's GDP. Today, we have gathered together to acknowledge their role as the champions of India's economic growth story and resilience. Some of the key highlights to look forward to today, ladies and gentlemen, are keynote addresses by several distinguished personalities, the release of the publication India's Top 500 Companies 2021, and the presentation of the Corporate Awards 2021. There are multiple highlights in the 2021 edition. This year's theme revolves around the most discussed imperative for businesses across the globe: environmental, social, and governance (ESG) priorities. As a matter of fact, ESG factors are quantifiable measures of a company's sustainability and social impact. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced the world to give a serious thought to the risk of uncertainties and to pursue a green recovery and responsible growth. ESG has therefore become critical for compliance and risk managers as well as for potential investors. Given this reality, the theme for this year's India's Top 500 Companies 2021 event is laying the foundations for an ESG-Ready Corporate India, which is quite apt. Before I proceed, I will take this opportunity to express our gratitude to our event partners. Our title partner, CtrlS, our life insurance partner, Life Insurance Corporation of India, our co-partners, Sodexo SVC India Private Limited, and Acute Ratings and Research Limited. Our branding partners, National Mineral Development Corporation and NTT Data Business Solutions Private Limited, and all our publication partners. Once again, we invite you to share your experiences of this conference and your views on various social media platforms. And do not forget to use the hashtags #DMB Top 500 and #DMB Corporate Awards. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's give this event a fresh and sparkling start by inviting Mr. Neeraj Sahai, the president of Dun Bradstreet International, the leading global provider of business decisioning data and analytics. Mr. Sahai ensures the pursuit of growth opportunities, operating efficiency, and best practices across Asia, India, the UK and Ireland, and the Dun & Bradstreet Worldwide Network. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Neeraj Sahai.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to begin by welcoming our distinguished dignitaries. Dr. Bibek Debroy, Chairman, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. Dr. Krishnamurthy Subramanyam, Chief Economic Advisor, Ministry of Finance, Government of India. Mr. Richard Morgan, Regional Managing Director, West and Central Asia, Maersk. And Ms. Rakhi Kumar, SVP Sustainability Solutions, Liberty Mutual Insurance. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my colleagues at Dun & Bradstreet, I extend a warm welcome and sincere thanks to all of you for attending India's Top 500 Companies 2021 event, one of Dun & Bradstreet's premier events in India. For more than 2 decades, this publication has served as a fitting tribute to the Indian corporate sector. It is a privilege for me to be here to recognize the best performing companies in India in 2020, especially during this time when many businesses continue to face challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we are here to acknowledge the incredible contribution that business leaders like you have made to the Indian and global economy. Let me start with stating something I believe all of us would agree. 2020 was a truly unprecedented year of global disruption. Around 100 million people were pushed into extreme poverty across countries, and the toll on human lives in terms of infections and mortality is the highest since the 1980 influenza pandemic. Globally, per capita income levels have regressed by 5 years. Dun Bradstreet's COVID-19 Commerce Disruption Tracker, which illustrates the impact of the pandemic on businesses' ability to operate, generate sales, and have employees perform their work duties, peaked at over 70% in April 2020 and moderated to 40% by Jan 2021. A parallel analysis done by the World Bank on data from over 60 countries shows that companies' sales plunged by 45% in April to September 2020 from the pre-pandemic levels and by 27% in October 2020 to January 2021. These figures demonstrate the profound, wide-ranging, and more often than not, long-lasting consequences that such disruptions have on businesses. Today, with both the public health crisis and the linked economic turmoil still present, there remains a level of uncertainty about what the full ramifications of COVID-19 will be for the decade ahead. As business leaders, it is essential that we continue to consider the bigger picture while taking into account the responses and recovery from the current crisis. Empirical evidence shows that new ideas often emerge or are developed in response to extreme needs arising during a crisis. For example, the Black Death in the 14th century led to the end of feudalism and serfdom. World War II led to an increase in participation rate of women in the workforce. The 9/11 terrorist attacks reshaped transportation and security policies worldwide. SARS reshaped attitudes towards shopping and led to a surge in online retailing in China. And finally, as many of you have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, many businesses, if not all, have come to realize that data-driven digital transformation is critical to success now and in the future. Industry studies show us that the share of digital or digitally enabled products of businesses has accelerated by up to 10 years due to the impact of COVID-19. This is the first pandemic where digital technologies have enabled remote working, learning, networking, and a plethora of other things. Some of these changes are likely here to stay. Consequently, data growth and data-driven decision-making will continue to proliferate. A commissioned study conducted by Forrester Consulting on behalf of Dun Bradstreet shows that data activation leaders, or those companies which are effective in uncovering truth and meaning from data that inform actions, are more than twice as likely as other companies to report increases to their sales cycle speed. Significantly, better outcomes for other metrics such as customer lifetime value, brand awareness, and revenue were also observed, all pointing to the fact that the shift to digital is changing businesses, industries, and economies. As the world's leading global provider of business decisioning, data, and analytics for the last 180 years, Dun Bradstreet has helped clients survive financial crises, recessions, the Great Depression, wars, pandemics, and many more global changes. Throughout these events in history, Dun Bradstreet has helped clients manage risk and enable growth. I'm proud to say that nearly 90% of the Fortune 500 companies and companies of every size around the world rely on Dun Bradstreet as an essential and trusted partner. With a cumulative revenue equivalent to 1.5 times the US economy, the Fortune Global 500 companies will play a crucial role in global economic recovery through their strong forward and backward linkages. Similarly, we anticipate India's top 500 companies to lead India's economic recovery, given that they contribute to nearly 45% of India's foreign exchange earnings and around 23% of India's gross tax revenues. The World Bank expects India to be the second fastest growing major economy in the current fiscal year. None of this growth or progress would be possible without the passion, commitment, and the vision of leaders like you who are running these businesses. Before I conclude, I offer my congratulations to all the companies that are being featured in the list of India's top 500 companies 2021 and the winners across the 37 categories of Corporate Awards 2021. I wish to extend my deepest gratitude to Shri Bibek Debroy, Chairman, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, for joining us on this special occasion. A big thank you to our partners and co-partners for having made this event possible. And last but not least, a thank you for joining us at our virtual event today. This event is all about you, so let's bring it back to why we are here, to honor India's top 500 companies in 2021, especially the award winners today. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sahai. It's now time, ladies and gentlemen, for me to invite a leader par excellence, Mr. Avinash Gupta, the Managing Director and CEO, India, Dun Bradstreet. He is an execution-focused senior leader with a strong global background. Currently, he is responsible for Dun Bradstreet's go-to-market strategy and business operations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Avinash Gupta.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of Dun Bradstreet at this grand virtual event, the India's Top 500 Companies 2021. I wish to extend my deep appreciation and gratitude to all the distinguished personalities who have graced this occasion, as well as all the participants, partners, and members of the audience. Neeraj has already given you a great perspective on Dun & Bradstreet from a global perspective. I will focus on our India business and the stars of today's conference, the top 500 companies. Dun & Bradstreet began its journey in India approximately 2.5 decades ago. Over these years, Dun & Bradstreet has been chronicling the contribution of India's Indian corporate sector through our premier publication, India's Top 500 Companies, since 1997. At that time, India, as you will recall, had just begun charting its course towards becoming one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Over the years, the publication earned the reputation of one of the most credible and comprehensive compendiums on the Indian corporate sector. And of course, the most definitive ranking of large Indian companies. The significance of India's top 500 companies can be measured on many counts. India's top 500 companies represent the driving force of the Indian economy, as they contribute to as much of 16% of India's GDP, nearly 45% of the country's foreign exchange earnings, and around 23% of the gross tax revenues. Over the past 2 decades, while the Indian economy grew at approximately 14 times, the top 500 companies have in fact grown at a faster rate of more than 16-fold. It's been a more than a 16-fold rise in aggregate revenue and 29 times expansion in market capitalization over the same period. 127 companies, interestingly, have consistently featured in all editions of the publication's inception in 1997. Also, let me walk you through an interesting fact that we discovered at the Top 500 Award over the years. The total revenue of the largest and biggest company in the current 21st edition of the publication stands at more than 5.7 trillion rupees. This significantly exceeds the total revenue of all the top 500 companies taken together during the first edition in 1997. This clearly stands as a testimony to the kind of influence corporates have had on aspects like revenue generation, income generation, social upliftment, and generation of livelihoods. This conference is a well-deserved recognition to all you stalwarts over the last 21 years. Now let's look at the central theme of the conference, laying the foundations for an ESG-Ready Corporate India. While researching for this conference, I read an interesting line which said that to prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to the entire ecosystem. ESG today helps companies to create that positive difference in their day-to-day existence. Globally, the ESG investment theme continues to gain traction. In terms of passive funds, for example, total assets invested in ESG ETFs and ETPs rose to $101 billion as of July last year, 2020, compared to $22 billion as of the end of 2018. This demonstrates clearly that ESG is gaining global impetus, and Indian enterprises must focus also, now more than ever, on integrating sustainability on a priority basis in their long-term objectives. Let me share some data points on what is happening in India. The NSE conducted a survey of some 50-odd top companies in 2020. This survey stated that the Nifty 100 ESG TRI and Nifty 100 Enhanced ESG TRI have delivered 11.3% and 11.5% respectively return per annum since April 2011. And this is, interestingly, 70 basis points and 90 basis points higher than the returns on the Nifty 100, which was approximately 10.6%. Luckily, investors and analysts have started considering the non-financial parameters, both internal and external, to understand the potential impact of these identified parameters on the company's performance and risk exposure to their investment. It is also now clear that investor interest in responsible investing is gaining momentum. This clearly demands for an objective, quantitative analysis of the effect of ESG on the investors' portfolio's performance. Dun Bradstreet has already begun its journey to support the companies in the ESG initiatives. We have planned some cutting-edge products powered by data, analytics, and AI to help clients survive numerous challenges through the power of better decision-making. Coming back to today and India's top 500 publication, which has seen a series of firsts in this year's edition. To begin with, this year we have included a separate listing of India's premier 150 unlisted companies. This is a tribute to large unlisted companies who, although not being part of the universe of the top 500 companies, play a significant role in economic development of the country. This year's publication also features an additional listing of India's leading 100 ESG performers. And finally, this year, we will be presenting the Dun Bradstreet Corporate Awards on a digital platform, given sign of times, for the first time ever. All of these come together very nicely in the form of the most credible and fitting tribute to the Indian corporate sector. That is the Dun Bradstreet Top 500 Companies 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, on a final note, I would like to congratulate all the companies that have been featured in India's Top 500 2021 publication, as well as the award winners. We look forward to your continued participation and patronage in the future. I wish to thank specifically Shri Bibek Debroy, the Chairman, Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister, for taking time out from his busy schedule and gracing the occasion with his presence. I would also like to thank Dr. Krishnamurthy Subramanyam, Chief Economic Advisor, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, for sharing his views. Thank you, distinguished personalities of guests who have graced this virtual event. I look forward to hearing from all of you and sharing your views from the experiences of today. I would also like to thank CtrlS and Cloud4C, in particular Mr. Sridhar, who has been a partner with us in making this event a grand success. A big thank you to our partners, Life Insurance of India, Sodexo, Equity Ratings and Research, NTT Data, and NMDC. I hope you all find today's event insightful and have some valuable takeaways. Wish you a great day and look forward to your valued participation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, for sharing your views. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker now is enriched with more than 30 years of experience in the freight forwarding, liner shipping, and supply chain business. He currently serves as the Regional Managing Director, West and Central Asia, Maersk. Originally from Ireland, he has been with Maersk for more than 18 years and held positions of importance across Europe, West and East Asia. Friends, please welcome Mr. Richard Morgan, Managing Director, West and Central Asia, Maersk, with a round of applause.
Hello, and a warm welcome to all those who have virtually gathered together to celebrate India's top 500 companies of 2021. I am Richard Morgan, Managing Director, Maersk, West and Central Asia, and I am delighted to be speaking today on Dun Bradstreet's platform and in front of the top corporates of India. Before we get started, I would like to extend my warm regards to all of you who have in some way or another been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Even though I'm based out of Dubai, there's not been a single day in the last few months when I've not thought about the people of India and the hardships that all of you have undergone. And with the bravery, tenacity, and faith that have always characterized Indian people. You came together and faced the challenges in great empathy for one another, and thus overcame most of the hardships in a way that is hard to imagine for someone who has not experienced it firsthand. India has risen as a key market and country, not only for us in Maersk, but for the global economy. It has become a source of the most inventive and ingenious human talent. India is a land of opportunity, and each one of you is the driving force behind the potential of this nation. Being an integrator of container logistics and handling important volumes and key routes for imports and exports in and out of India to the rest of the world, we at Maersk are fully aware of how important India is for global trade. This is not only from the perspective of the manufacturing sector, but also from a technological point of view, with the innovations that India brings to the world. Its talented and thriving people, with their particular variety of ethnics, cultures, and beliefs, characterized by resilience, faith, and adaptability, which is demonstrated in the way that the whole system functions. Every time I hear a success story from India, it firms up my belief that this really is the country that can achieve great things. Challenges in the current global situation over the past year and a half, the world has changed. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought upon us unprecedented challenges. It's changed the way the world operates and taught us lessons that will be passed on for generations to come. We have seen the world almost coming to a standstill, health systems crumbling, people living in fear, and the global economy being threatened. In these tough conditions, we had a role to play in keeping global supply chains running, enabling trade, and protecting economies. Throughout the pandemic, we had our vessels sailing, our ports and terminals functioning, and our warehouses operating, ensuring that the flow of goods around the world did not stop. The challenges were many: scarcity of manpower, physical limitations due to social distancing, restrictions on travel, imbalances in demand versus supply, and so on. However, right at the beginning, as the pandemic took hold, we set ourselves three priorities: protecting our people, serving our customers, and helping society fight the virus. These priorities emerged out of the values that are deeply embedded within us. To safeguard our employees, we shifted to working from home from almost all of our offices around the world. With a workforce of 80,000 employees, it was not an easy task to have an IT infrastructure that could take the stress of thousands of employees beginning to work remotely. I don't think I'd be exaggerating if I said that we almost quadrupled our VPN capacity in just a matter of days. We rolled out policies to help and support employees working from home. For example, during the second wave, when essential stores in Mumbai were only open until 11 a.m., our leadership team consciously decided that we would not schedule any virtual meetings and calls before 11 a.m. That was to give our employees the necessary bandwidth to tackle their household chores before they began their workday. To support our customers and to ensure that they have access to everything that they need, we rolled out a number of digital solutions. At Maersk, the digital transformation started long before COVID struck, but with the pandemic accelerated the transformation. What would have taken 3 to 4 years was accomplished in a matter of months. Today, we have established a digital ecosystem that allows our customers to get quotations, book shipments with instant confirmation, track their goods, even make payments and complete digital documentation from the convenience of their offices or homes. Every product, every service that we rolled out has been centered around the requirements of our customers. We have been more agile and resilient than ever. We adjusted our network of vessel sailings. We moved empty containers from one country to another where they were in higher demand. We sped up supply chains for crisis essential goods while slowing it down for commodities that were not in demand. Finally, while doing all of this, we never lost sight of what society needed. We undertook innumerable social activities to support communities and help them fight the virus. We distributed PPE kits, food and essentials to the needy. We conducted medical and hygiene drives to educate people about the illness and how to protect themselves from it. We even transported vital medical aid on our vessels for a nominal fee of $1. Maersk's commitment to ESG and sustainability as a fully integrated business priority. So talking of the pandemic also brings me to the theme for today that revolves around ESG. If the ongoing pandemic has taught us anything, it is the urgency with which we need to stay focused on ESG. The extent of disruptions that external factors can have on our businesses show us that we ought to be prepared for even the toughest challenges. What the corporate world has seen during the pandemic is that the organizations who had ESG as a management priority were able to protect their people better. They were able to support communities in a more meaningful way, and they ultimately showed strong economic performance too. In a way, embedded ESG priorities have made organizations more resilient, safeguarding themselves better against the pandemic and the challenges that came with it. Our priorities in our businesses, our transformations, our goals keep us busy. But without sustainability being at the top of our agenda, we can neither do justice to our business nor to the society for whom we do business. At Maersk, we updated our sustainability priorities last year to further integrate them into our business strategy. Our approach to sustainability is to take responsibility in line with our values and commitments, and to assume a leadership position on global issues where we have the necessary competencies and leverage that we can make a real difference. What we are also seeing is that our customers expect us to demonstrate high levels of ESG. They are elevating their expectations for sustainable products. They look to us to deliver decarbonized and increasingly responsible supply chain solutions. Almost 3 out of 4 of our key clients seriously consider sustainability in their supply chains, and 90 of our top 200 customers have set or are in the process of setting ambitious, science-based, zero carbon targets. ESG is moving from the niche confines of socially responsible investments to a focus on financially material impacts that matter to mainstream investors. ESG is increasingly becoming an important metric for investors, along with the financial factors for evaluating investments. With sustainable development being the desirable result of what we want to do, we at Maersk are making efforts to incorporate ESG issues into the analysis of our business performance as a whole. Ultimately, investors are looking to safeguard their interests. Commitment towards strong ethics and ESG gives them the confidence they are looking for. For us, for example, climate change is a key priority. We believe we have a responsibility towards society and our customers to reduce our carbon footprint. And therefore, we have a clear goal of decarbonization. We want to achieve carbon neutral shipping by 2050. We are taking concrete steps, like putting the world's first carbon neutral vessel on the ocean in 2023. And this is not limited to our core activities. We are also recycling our end-of-life vessels in the most sustainable manner at Alang in India. We have established responsible ship recycling standards that are in fact better than some of the globally accepted standards. We are also reporting on these recycling activities in the most transparent manner, and this has earned us higher ESG ratings too. Over the last years, we have matured well in terms of ESG becoming an integrated part of our strategy, and this is something that needs to be noted by Indian corporations too. It's never too late to start prioritizing sustainability. I am aware that the Indian government is pushing for foreign investment, and to ensure that the influential global funds make it to Indian companies, there must be widespread and serious adoption of ESG. There are enough proof points now that show embedding ESG into internal practices and along the value chain helps organizations mitigate risk arising from climate change, poor governance, and worker exploitation. This is the resilience that investors look to reward with higher valuations. There will be mandatory requirements for disclosures around ESG, but what is more important is the willingness of corporates to embed ESG within their strategies and operations without it being mandated. India will then benefit from the global funds that the Indian economy requires to get past the $5 trillion mark. It is in your hands to make the difference for a better future for us all, our environment, our society, and the people we work for. It is not something that should be mandated. It is something that should come from within. And with that, I would like to conclude my keynote for today, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the other dignitaries have to say. Once again, you are India's top business leaders, and I hope that you will continue making a positive impact in your respective businesses and industries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morgan, for your valuable insights. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're about an hour into our event, and the stage is set for me to welcome our next illustrious guest for the day. As Senior Vice President at Liberty Mutual, she leads efforts to integrate sustainability across the global enterprise and helps to develop the company's ESG strategy. She's a globally recognized stalwart in sustainability. She was recognized by the National Association of Corporate Directors, that's NACD, and has been identified as one of Boston's 100 most influential people of color by the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, the Boston Foundation, and Get Connected. Well, it's time now to welcome Ms. Rakhi Kumar.
I want to thank Dun Bradstreet for the invitation to speak to you today about a topic that's very dear to my heart. It's an honor to be here speaking to India's corporate elite, and it's some sort of personal homecoming for me as I'm returning to corporate India after 21 years in the US, much of it spent understanding the growing and evolving field of ESG. When I chose ESG as a career option, it was not a field. Even the term ESG had not been coined. Even today, ESG, which in literal terms means environmental, social, and governance, is a catch-all term with no real operational definition. And that term is often used interchangeably with sustainability or responsible business. And there's a misconception that, or perception that ESG is a corporate social responsibility, which it is not. CSR, or corporate social responsibility, has its roots in corporate philanthropy. And while CSR can be a subcomponent of an ESG program, that piece that aligns with a company's corporate values and social contributions, it cannot be a substitute. ESG is financially relevant to a company's business and strategy. The fact that we don't have a common definition of ESG impacts our understanding and our ability to conceptualize how these issues impact our business. It makes it harder for companies to implement ESG programs and truly integrate financially material ESG factors into their business. And that's why Dun & Bradstreet has made laying the foundation for an ESG-Ready Corporate India as this year's theme or the theme of this year's India's Top 500 Companies event. It's certainly well-timed and highlights where we are in the ESG journey. And I call it a journey because while ESG is going mainstream, our understanding of how these issues impact our business is still developing. However, that pace of evolution is rapid. And in some ways, ESG is like technology. It's obsolete before you even had time to implement it. And that pace can be overwhelming. Consequently, I've seen some companies shy away from pursuing the topic. It's not because they don't think ESG is important. They just don't know where to start. So today I'm hoping that I can simplify ESG and share some practical, action-oriented frameworks that can help us get started. So what is ESG? I like to think of ESG as these low probability, high impact factors that pose a risk to our business. The probability that something will go wrong due to ESG is low, but when it does go wrong, it can have very high financial and reputational impacts on a company or for a company's business and profitability. So think of that company that made a short strategic decision to cut back on its expenditure on safety. In the short term, that led to reduced costs and increased profits. However, that short-term decision led to an oil spill that cost the company over $65 billion in damages over a 20-year period. And this is one of many examples where a lack of focus on financially material ESG factors has led to losses either through fines, increased expenses, or loss of customers and market share. So why are we not adequately prioritizing ESG as a risk to our business? My personal view is that our risk frameworks really focus only on that probability aspect or angle of risk. We choose to ignore the high economic impact that can occur if the risk manifests itself. And that's why we don't take the action that's needed to mitigate this risk. If we were to expand our risk frameworks to include both probability and risk, ESG factors will start getting the attention it deserves. So, and given the blurred lines between ESG and CSR, it's important to identify the various ESG factors that are financially material to our businesses. Here again, there's no real consensus amongst regulators or investors, and there are several ESG reporting frameworks that exist. What investors are looking for is data or information that provides insights on how you are managing relevant ESG factors. Moreover, they want the data to be measurable, comparable, and consistently reported year after year. And that's why some of the world's investors are really promoting Sustainable Accounting Standard Boards, or SASB, SASB, SASB's reporting framework that identifies the 5 to 10 financially material ESG issues that can impact your business based on your industry. The SASB maps help guide companies on what to measure, manage, and report when it comes to ESG. So for example, for pharmaceutical companies, SASB identifies product pricing and selling as material to their business. And when it comes to IT services, IT service companies, information on their energy management, data security, and privacy are considered relevant. And I recognize that many of you here already have a very good understanding of ESG, but that some of you may be grappling with how do you oversee it within your business. After all, ESG covers a broad range of topics from human capital management and corporate culture to addressing climate change and improving board governance. I want to assure you that ESG is not different than any other business risk that you have been managing and mitigating in your careers. ESG factors pose risks, systemic risks, and or can be specific to a company and its industry. Systemic risks are those that are not in your control. Consequently, you need to consider different scenarios and outcomes when you build your strategies. So think of interest rates. These are set by RBI and commercial banks. Companies build their financial strategies based on interest rate environment and by stress testing their balance sheets at different interest rates to inform their capital strategies. Well, climate change is no different. Changing weather patterns pose systemic risk to our businesses by impacting supply chains, changing customer preferences, and increasing physical risks to your assets and your employees. So companies need to undertake climate scenario assessments and consider the physical and transition risks to build informed business strategies. ESG factors can also be specific to an industry or a company. But the good news here is that these are under your control. These can be managed and mitigated and need good planning, measurement, and reporting. So it's similar to managing your expenses and setting sales targets. So for example, many companies are committed to enhancing gender diversity in the workplace in order to reduce groupthink and increase or improve have better outcomes. And they're building programs to attract, retain, and promote women within the workplace. They set goals and measure performance or progress against those goals. Now that we are ESG ready, I want to share 3 criteria that I believe are vital to the building of a successful ESG program. Number 1, strong leadership and governance. It's really all about the tone at the top. Without board and chairman or CEO involvement and oversight, even the best ESG programs will falter. After all, employees are really focused on what leadership is focused on. Number 2, we need to integrate ESG into strategy. Earlier, I explained how ESG can pose a risk to our business. However, ESG is not just a risk, it's also an opportunity. And it provides these opportunities to companies by identifying products or the need for product innovation to meet changing customer needs or new markets that can fuel strategic growth. A good ESG program is well integrated into a company's business strategy and is considered vital to its success. Number 3, if ESG is a priority, you need to fund it like a priority. I've seen many well-intentioned companies falter because they have tried to build ESG programs with just one person. And then they're disappointed when their ESG efforts are not considered adequate from a market perspective. You need to be prepared to resource your ESG initiatives correctly. And I know when we talk about investments, the question asked is, what is the return on investments? Well, when it comes to ESG, the right question to ask is how long will we be in business if we do not invest in ESG? In closing, I really want to highlight how important it is for corporate India to get it right, both as a business community and as a nation. Our growing GDP fuels global growth. We're the top 7 economies in the world. However, in a 2018 report, the World Bank estimated that changing weather patterns, if left unchecked, could shave off over $1 trillion from India's GDP. Moreover, the race to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050 is impossible to achieve without India transitioning to a net zero economy. And that transition will challenge your businesses and need to be managed strategically. It's really my hope that you leave here today with a clarity of thought on how to proceed and have the conviction needed to build strong ESG programs that will make corporate India shine as a beacon of ESG globally. The world is depending on us to get this right. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kumar, for building and sharing such unique perspectives. It's time now for us to welcome a leader par excellence. He's the founder of CtrlS, the world's largest rated 4 data center. He's also the founder and CEO of Cloud4C, the world's leading cloud-managed services provider, serving Fortune 500 clients. A pioneer in the information and communications industry, he has spent the last 2 decades building innovative technology solutions in cloud computing and infrastructure, energy management, and software development. He's also the founder and chairman of the Pioneer Group of Companies. He's also closely involved with TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs, a non-profit organization devoted to empowering entrepreneurs across industries and stages. Ladies and gentlemen, time now to welcome Mr. Sridhar Pinaporedi with a huge round of applause.
Hello, everyone. Environment, society, governance. It is our collective responsibility. It is our individual commitment as well. The earth needs healing. Corporates like us are at a vantage point, and we all can make a difference. And there is a selfish, vested interest in doing so too. Businesses cannot survive, let alone thrive, in a broken world. Sustainability makes a very good business sense. Sustainable development goals, as put forth in 2015 Paris Agreement, see a whopping $2 to $3 trillion investments every year, unlocking limitless possibilities. In fact, one of the largest CPG brands in the world has reported that there is a 30% faster growth for its sustainable brands over the other brands that they own. While founding CtrlS, we decided to make ESG as our key differentiator. This led to over 80 innovations, several of them leading to national and global awards and recognition for CtrlS. Ladies and gentlemen, the facade of our 11-story data center in Mumbai, every inch of it is a solar panel. We breathe in the sun and power our utilities with its shine. We have over 1 megawatt solar plant in Mumbai, DC, and another smaller one in Bengaluru. We increased our use of renewable energy by 1200x in the last 3 years. And last year alone, we reduced our carbon dioxide emission by 11,360 tons. We are glad when our efforts were recognized by US Green Building Council with the Regional Leadership Award of USGBC, making a first in data center category, followed by a Golden Peacock Award for eco-innovation. We were the first, and I hope there will be many more walking the talk. Our commitment to sustainable and resilient buildings and communities remains uncompromised. Each of our 6 hyperscale data centers are LEED Platinum certified green data centers. We are committed to be carbon neutral by 2030. We are happy to have built a culture of respect and care towards the environment as we take businesses to the cloud. Talking of culture, inclusivity and diversity cannot be badges of honor. I do not believe in tokenism. It is not about celebrating a Women's Day or force-fitting representation to tick a box for regulatory compliance. We heard a lot of things: equity before equality, inclusivity beyond diversity, society before self. These words ring hollow if they are not practiced in day-to-day life. Our teams are diverse. At CtrlS, opportunities do not differentiate on color, caste, creed, race, religion, language, or gender. We do not believe in having a woman colleague. We have colleagues, not badges. And giving to society is not just a photo op for us. This pandemic brought us face to face with some brutal realities. Resources were scarce. It was a sobering reminder not to let the guard down. We vaccinated our colleagues and their families as fast as we could. We tried to ease the pain of our fellow citizens by procuring oxygen concentrators and donating them to the hospitals around India. Today, we are better prepared to face the third wave. Society is you and me. We must have each other's back. It is a very simple equation. Being a sports enthusiast myself, I find it fulfilling when we enable young talent to perform better. When Isha Singh would be shooting her air pistols in Tokyo Olympics, the cheers will be high in CtrlS corridors as her sponsor. When our young table tennis enthusiasts hold their own at the national, international level, it would be a matter of pride for the CtrlS family. Recently, we also sponsored National Track Cycling Championship, the first of its kind with global recognition. With the little support we can offer, we aim to fire global ambitions in our young talents. Governance brings order. It is a mandate to stay true to the lofty ideals we put before us. I am a doer. I believe in action, and action is what is needed. And action is what we take. Corporate governance practices are not just mandatory requirements, but a way to demonstrate transparency. We are upfront about our actions and publishing the ESG report as a part of our business responsibility and reporting framework. We also put together the EHS policy. We created a fully evolved and responsible core office to oversee adoption of business ethics, anti-money laundering policy, and whistleblower policies. A senior chief compliance officer is there to ensure fair practices and resolve any undesirable instance. We hold ourselves responsible to build a sustainable world. Good governance fosters goodwill, as you all would agree. India, despite recent shrinkage, is one of the most powerful economies in the world. As corporates, our growth and profitability is tied to the recovery of not just our economy, but people and society. We reap dividends only if we invest and invest wise. Environment, society, and governance. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the hottest stocks to invest in. With this, I thank Dun Bradstreet for the opportunity to share my perspective on ESG practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sridhar Pinaporedi. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my extreme pleasure to welcome our next guest, the champion of everything economy. With all great respect and gratitude, I welcome Dr. Krishnamurthy Subramanyam, the youngest Chief Economic Advisor of the Government of India. A PhD from Chicago and IIT-IIM alumnus, Dr. Subramanyam advocates ethical wealth creation through the amalgamation of the invisible hand of the market and the hand of trust. His academic papers in the fields of banking, finance, innovation, and economics and corporate governance have been published in important global journals. His idea of thali-nomics, what a common man pays for a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian thali, has been acclaimed as the Indian Big Mac Index. Combined with the Bare Necessities Index, the idea measures reach of welfare programs rolled out by the Government of India. He authored the 2019 economic survey that laid out the strategic blueprint for India to become a US $5 trillion economy by generating a virtuous cycle where private investment, wage and employment growth and consumption feed into each other. His push for the behavioral economics of nudge has been acknowledged for its potential to bring behavioral change into India. The slew of reforms implemented by the government draw on ideas advocated by Dr. Subramanyam. The impact of his work is truly immeasurable. Let's hear it loud and clear for Dr. Subramanyam.
Hi, good morning, and a very warm greetings to all those who have assembled at India's top 500 companies 2021. It's my privilege to share some thoughts on the prospects of the Indian economy going forward. I'm going to organize my talk in primarily three parts. The way in which the Indian economy has recovered over the last 1 year, that's the first part, the impact of the second wave, and finally, I'll end by talking about the prospects for growth going forward. Firstly, if we look at the GDP numbers for the financial year that went by, we saw a V-shaped recovery in the macroeconomy after a near 25% decline in the first quarter. When in my media interactions, I had mentioned that there was a V-shaped recovery that was on. It's very heartening to see that has indeed transpired at the macroeconomic level, with the second quarter growth being much lower at 7.5%, and Q3 and Q4 recording positive growth. So India being among those few countries to have consecutive quarters of positive growth during the pandemic. A couple of important observations that we must make regarding the last year's growth scenario. Firstly, the government's emphasis has been on capital expenditure driven growth, because capital expenditures create assets. The fiscal multipliers are much higher when government expenditure goes into creating capital assets. For instance, for revenue expenditure, the multiplier is less than 1, while for capital expenditures, the multiplier is about 4.5. So the emphasis has been on capital expenditure driven growth. And if you look at the fourth quarter numbers, and more broadly the second half numbers for the second half of last year, this philosophy has indeed transpired and has generated the benefits that the government intended. Firstly, if you look at the fourth quarter, the investment rate in the economy was at a 6.5-year high, measured by the gross fixed capital formation to GDP ratio at 34.3%. This ratio itself grew at almost 30% quarter on quarter in the fourth quarter, and that indeed led to significant expansion in construction activity at almost 15% growth, and had spillover benefits for consumption, which after declining for 3 quarters grew at 2.7% in the fourth quarter, and also for some of the service sectors especially impacted by the pandemic, which like travel, tourism, etc., which declined by only 2.3% after registering degrowths in high double digits in the previous 3 quarters. So that's the other key point, that the virtuous cycle starting from private investment onto growth and thereby consumption, which in turn then feeds onto investment. Early evidence of that was visible in the fourth quarter and overall in the second half of last year. Of course, the recovery that was happening has the momentum of that got impacted to some extent by the second wave. While the second wave was quite devastating on the health side, the economic impact of that has been limited, primarily because the second wave was much shorter in duration, about 6 to 8 weeks compared to about 6 months in the first wave. And secondly, restrictions, economic restrictions that were placed were primarily at the state level, and therefore were heterogeneous and were asynchronous as well. And this was all seen, for instance, in the month of April. About 30% of GDP activity was impacted geographically, but even there, essentials and interstate movement was not impacted. In the month of May, about 60% geographically was impacted, but again, essentials and interstate movement was not impacted that much. So if we look at the several high-frequency indicators, from the 20th of May onwards, they have started improving significantly. So overall, we expect the impact of the second wave to be not very large, and therefore the projections that we've made for growth in this year, with some impact, but not very large, the growth should actually transpire in this year. Going forward, if we look at the growth prospects, we economists measure that using the potential growth of the economy. The key aspect that I want to focus there is the supply side reforms, significant reforms that have been done, whether it's the agricultural, the farm bill, the labor reforms, the private enterprise policy focused on the private sector, enterprise policy focused on the private sector, the export PLI scheme, the change in the MSME definition, on the financial sector, the creation of the Bad Bank, the creation of the DFI, the privatization of 2 public sector banks, and the expansion in FDI limits to 74%. So as you can see, many factors of production, which is labor, capital, raw materials, have all been impacted. Are actually, the effort is to try and make them far more efficient, so that growth can be pushed up. And we anticipate, therefore, the impact of these reforms to be showing up primarily in 2 macroeconomic aspects. One is the investment rate in the economy, which, as we saw in the fourth quarter, had gone up significantly, but should ramp up as we go forward, and we slowly get out of the pandemic through vaccination. And the second part is the productivity as measured by the incremental capital output ratio. Both of these should go up. Productivity especially should increase with privatization, with asset monetization. Privatization, changes assets from the hands of those that are not utilizing those assets as efficiently to those that can utilize it far more efficiently. And asset monetization, in turn, takes assets that are not being used as much, and transfers it to hands that will use it productively. So together, these and the capital expenditure driven growth, which crowds in private investment, have the potential to ramp up significantly the investment rate in the economy, and thereby also and productivity. So we anticipate from FY23 onwards, growth to start being more than 6.5%, around touching 7%, and accelerating further as the impact of these reforms is felt on the economy. So I'll end by talking about the importance of vaccination for us to aid this recovery. If you look at the data that's coming in, for instance, from the United Kingdom, UK now has a huge number of cases, about 40,000, but hospitalizations are much lower, deaths are much lower. So if you look at the charts, both daily infections and active cases have gone up significantly in the UK, but hospitalizations and deaths have actually remained stagnant. And that is the impact of vaccination, where once you get vaccinated, then the pandemic, COVID base, essentially, becomes less potent and becomes like a common flu. And that is what is indeed happening in the United Kingdom, similarly in the United States as well. So as our vaccination efforts are proceeding. In fact, now we've vaccinated close to more than 370 million people, which is more than the population of the United States. We've given 1 dose at least. And if you read the literature, whether it's Lancet or the British Medical Journal or other journals, they're all mentioning that even 1 dose creates immunity. Of course, 2 doses create far more immunity, and this has been working even against the Delta or the Delta plus variant. So vaccination is therefore incredibly important for us to actually recover from the pandemic, and thereby convert the COVID into a common, effectively a common flu, and thereby reducing the impact significantly. So which will help to really bring back demand in a lot of the contact sensitive sectors. You would have also all noticed the measures that have been brought in to actually provide credit for for these affected sectors. So together, together with the reforms and the focus on vaccination, I expect growth to start hitting close to 7%, 6.5% to 7% from FY23 onwards, and accelerate from there on. Overall, given the significant reforms that have been done over the last 1.5 years, I have no hesitation in saying that I look forward to a decade of high growth for India. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subramanyam. Your words create awareness and generate curiosity while inspiring all of us. Thank you so much once again. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to one of the key highlights of today's event, the keynote address of our guest of honor for today, Dr. Bibek Debroy. I once again invite Mr. Sridhar Pinaporedi to take over the virtual mic and introduce our eminent guest before he delivers his keynote address.
Thank you, Suchitra, for inviting me again. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome and thank our guest of honor, Dr. Bibek Debroy, for joining us today. Dr. Debroy is the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. He is also the president of Indian Statistical Institute. He is an alumnus of Presidency College, Kolkata, Delhi School of Economics, and Trinity College of Cambridge. He has authored, edited several books, papers, and popular articles, and also been a contributing editor for major newspapers. He has been a recipient of Padma Shri, the fourth highest civilian award of India, in 2015. He received D.Lit in 2018. He's also received several other awards, including Sri Ram Sandlam Award for Financial Journalism in 2013 and Lifetime Achievement Award by US-India Business Summit. Once again, a warm welcome to you, Dr. Debroy.
Thank you for inviting me to this event. It is always a delight to be present at a Dun Bradstreet event, and I've been part of such events in the past in more happier circumstances. In more happier circumstances because those were times when one could do this physically. Unfortunately, given what has been going on in the rest of the world and given what has been going on in India, we have to resort to the virtual mode. The obvious question to ask is what exactly is going on in India and what does the future augur for India? There are two related ways one can respond to the question, and both are related. The first issue is purely one that concerns the health sector. In particular, the pandemic, COVID. What is going to happen to the pandemic? Is the worst over? Is there going to be a third phase? Is there going to be a third peak? Is there going to be a third stage? I think one should ask that question with a certain nuance in mind. Indian states and India's regions are heterogeneous. Therefore, I don't think it is quite appropriate to ask an all-India level question about the third peak or the third phase. I'm no medical expert, but I'm inclined to think that this third phase, however defined, will vary in its spread and intensity across states. What, however, is important for us is the fact that regardless of the intensity of infections during the third wave, fatalities during the third wave are clearly not going to be as high as those during the second. And the reason for that is primarily vaccination. Yes, the vaccination record should be better still, but nonetheless, what has happened so far, subject to some variations across states, is fairly impressive. Therefore, notwithstanding our sometimes irresponsible collective social behavior, I am inclined to think that whenever there is a third phase, the impact of that in terms of deaths will not be that serious. Linked to that is what is going to happen to economic activity. In reacting to economic activity, one must understand that economic activity is largely a function also of the constraints on economic activity, by which I mean the lockdown or its variations. Unlike the lockdown last year, which was union government determined, the lockdown now is decentralized. And the easing of the lockdown is also decentralized. So the impact of the lockdown is also not going to be as serious as was the impact of the lockdown last year. Quite obviously, there are sectors that have close human-to-human interfaces. Quite clearly, those sectors like travel and tourism and hotels will continue to be affected. When one is talking about the economy, one typically talks about growth rates, GDP growth rates. GDP growth rates are rates. So they are a function of what the base was last year. So if the base in 2021 dropped by 7 and some decimal point percentages, correspondingly the growth rate in 21-22, because of that low base, will be high. And when I say that, I'm talking about real rates of growth. This year's budget had set a real growth rate of 10% this year. And there are people who have said, oh my God, how can we have 10% real rate of growth? I'm inclined to think that because of what I've said about the low base last year, this year, we will probably have a real rate of growth of around 10%, give or take half a percentage point. And depending on what assumptions you make about inflation, that converts into a 14% nominal rate of growth, which seems to be fairly impressive. And it also has implications for corporate profitability. The indicators that have surfaced so far show that the corporate profitability results are pretty good. There are indicators which also show that the economic revival is indeed happening. But I think the right question to ask is not about what is the growth rate in 21-22, but to ask what is likely to be the growth rate in 22-23. In 22-23, will we get back to a rate of growth, real rate of growth of something like 7%? Or will we get back to a rate of growth, a real rate of growth of 5.5%, incrementally inching up to 7% and even 7.5%? One way of stating what I've just said, slightly differently, is notwithstanding the fairly impressive real and nominal rate of growth that we are certain to witness this year, the base level of economic activity in something like March 22 will still be lower than the level of economic activity in something like March 2019. Stated differently, what the pandemic has resulted in is a whittling away of 2 years of economic development and attendant human development. So it is not only that the target of $5 trillion moves far away, but also the fact that adhering to the 2030 SDG targets for India will be a little bit more difficult. The question to ask is what drives growth? And in the last resort, growth purely from the point of view of national income accounting has only 4 sources: consumption, investment expenditure, government expenditure, and net exports. Compared to last year, as of now, consumption and investment tend to be somewhat muted. But net exports have functioned better compared to last year. So for 22-23, the question to ask is how are these 4 going to revive? Will net exports continue to grow? Will private investments and consumption grow once the uncertainty goes away? What about government expenditure? Government expenditure is constrained because of fiscal considerations. And when one is talking about government expenditure, one does not only mean government expenditure at the union government level, because there is also government expenditure at state government levels. And there are questions that need to be asked about the efficiency of that public expenditure, about the level at which this public expenditure takes place. If you remember, in her last budget speech, the finance minister had talked about a revamping and a re-examination of the centrally sponsored schemes. This is particularly important because one of the things COVID does is to impart a focus on health, which may not always be an obvious increase in health expenditure as a share of GDP, but also a re-switching of government expenditure from other channels. One of the worrying signs at the moment is, although, as I said, the corporate sector seems to be doing well, which is the focus of the Dun Bradstreet exercise, although it is a fact that economic activity seems to be picking up, so far there aren't any robust signs of employment picking up, particularly in the urban areas. And this is really a function of, or largely a function of, what has been happening to unincorporated enterprise, and I have in mind MSMEs. The last point I want to make is India is in a process of one particular transition in addition to others, which is of that of moving from an informal / unorganized economy to a formal oblique organized economy. That requires two kinds of legal identification. One is for the individual. We have the beginnings of that in Aadhaar, though there is tweaking that has to be done of Aadhaar to link it to various government programs, union as well as state governments. The second one, which is still missing, is some kind of a legal identity for enterprise, and I don't mean only corporate enterprise. That legal identity is still missing. And once we have these transitions, which are part and parcel of the formalization, we will have a better handle, not only in terms of government expenditure, also in terms of what is going on to economic activity. Thank you once again for inviting me. It's not the best of times, but it is better to what it was a few months ago. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Debroy, for sharing your treasure trove of insights with us. We seldom get the opportunity to know and understand the views of thought leaders on how they perceive the economy will grow and become resilient. In conversation with Dr. Debroy is Mr. Sridhar Pinaporedi, who has a couple of questions which will help us understand Dr. Debroy's perspective. So over to you, Mr. Pinaporedi.
Thank you, Sujitra. Ladies and gentlemen, we all believe that GDP is the true measure of economic well-being. In 2019, our guest of honor has co-written an article that dwelt on how GDP was not a true measure of economic well-being. Dr. Debroy, would you like to throw some light on the same? How a nation's competitiveness and economic well-being ought to be measured, especially in the current landscape?
This requires a long answer. GDP and criticisms of GDP as an aggregate measure are not new. They've been around since the late 1930s when GDP first evolved, thanks to the work of Simon Kuznets. GDP is obviously an aggregate measure. It doesn't take into account distribution. No one suggests for a minute that GDP is perfect. But no one has come up with a satisfactory alternative, which is an aggregate measure. There are a battery of measures we can use, such as those that are linked to human development. But in terms of a single measure, which is available with the requisite data, we don't quite have an alternative.
Thank you, Dr. Debroy, for your time spent on how GDP should be viewed. I have another question. The pandemic has redefined aspects like business resilience and agility. The adoption of digital transformation has helped bridge the gaps in such aspects in recent times. To what extent do you see digital transformation influencing the operations and strategies of businesses going forward?
Thank you, Mr. Sridhar, for that question. I would be very hesitant to generalize. I can either react in terms of what it has done to enterprises, or I can react in terms of what it has done to individuals. And the two do overlap, but the two are not quite the same. All digitization, to the extent that poverty, unemployment, other indicators of deprivation are functions of asymmetry of information, all digitization helps eliminate that asymmetry of information. So one of the things the pandemic has done is to provide an extra fillip to digitization. Equally, for enterprise, there were enterprises which were already digitally fairly advanced or had taken initiatives towards that. And the pandemic has come as an external shock. And confronted with any external shock, there are different ways different companies react. Some react a bit more than others, even within the corporate sector. And indeed, it is the case that some companies have been able to use this external shock and digitization to be more competitive and have been able to adjust to changes in the labor market a little bit faster. But there are also companies which, because of the digital divide, and remember the digital divide also has a distinct geographical spread. We cannot talk only about Mumbai and Delhi. There are also companies which have suffered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. ESG has gained a significant traction across the globe, especially since the outbreak of the pandemic. What are some of the ways ESG can help create value, especially for businesses?
Thank you for that question. I would again reiterate what I said in response to my earlier answer, which is that I would be very hesitant to generalize. There are enterprises, I'm not going to use the word companies necessarily, there are enterprises which were already investing, so to speak, in ESG because they perceived that ESG was adding value to the business. I think what the pandemic and its reinforcement of health as a desirable objective has done is to reinforce that. If a business was not interested in it to start off with, has the pandemic suddenly turned its interest to this? I'm not convinced that that has necessarily happened. So there is quite a lot of heterogeneity and diversity.
Now, that indeed was a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Debroy and Mr. Pinaporedi. That surely provided a lot of food for thought. Well, friends, with that, it is now time to showcase one of this year's much-awaited publications, India's Top 500 Companies 2021. The publication lists, profiles, and ranks the top 500 companies among India's large listed corporates on the basis of key parameters such as total income, net profit, and net worth, amongst others. The companies are also classified into nearly 60 sectors on the basis of their dominant business operations. It also showcases the companies that have featured in all 21 editions of the publication so far, as well as companies that have been featured for the very first time. This year, as a tribute to large corporates that are not listed on the bourses, the publication also provides a special listing titled India's Premier 150 Unlisted Companies. Furthermore, the publication also provides a separate listing of the top ESG performers among this year's universe of the top 500 companies. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to showcase the publication India's Top 500 Companies 2021. And now I'd like to request Dr. Bibek Debroy to kindly do the honors. Well, there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. the Dun Bradstreet CtrlS India's Top 500 Companies 2021. The publication will be circulated among CXOs of leading Indian corporates, policymakers, regulators, Government of India allied ministries, trade promotion councils, chambers of commerce, embassies, and stock exchanges, among others. Furthermore, the publication will also be hosted on the Dun Bradstreet website. A big thank you to all of our dignitaries. We are now ready to dive into the much-awaited Corporate Awards 2021 ceremony. From here on, felicitations, rewards, and recognition will be presented to those who have made it to the top tier. These corporates have demonstrated exceptional performance, high benchmarks and quality standards, intensive focus, and collaborative efforts to achieve what they had set out to do. Let me say at the very outset that this was not an easy task. Dun & Bradstreet identified nearly 60 sectors in the universe of India's top 500 companies, such as banking, textiles, telecom, and so on. The award winners were decided through Dun & Bradstreet's proprietary financial model, which identified top performers in 37 key sectoral, growth-based, and theme-based award categories on the basis of a series of financial and non-financial parameters. So let's meet the real stars of the corporate India. We have had the honor to hear from some of our award winners too. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin with the agrochemical sector. And we're proud to announce the undisputed leader in its class. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Bayer Crop Science Limited. In the auto component sector, the organization that bags the award is undoubtedly the king of the ring. Let's make some noise for Motherson Sumi Systems Limited. We have a message to share from the company's chairman, Mr. Vivek Chand Sehgal.
Very happy moment for all of us at Motherson for this recognition by Dun & Bradstreet. This especially after the exceptional circumstances that all of us are going through this pandemic. But this year has shown we can do great things together, even in difficult times. It is all about trust, togetherness, and faith, and resilience has been our key driver.
The two-wheelers and three-wheelers segment has always had tough competition, and this year is no different. I present to you the traditional favorite of the millions, a huge round of applause for Bajaj Auto Limited. Let's tune in to what the company's CFO, Mr. Soumen Ray, has to say.
This is to thank Dun & Bradstreet for recognizing Bajaj Auto. It's coincidental that this has come in the year in which we are celebrating our 75 years. Currently, we serve customers in 70 plus countries across the globe through our range of products starting from a sturdy Boxer, a sporty Pulsar, a ready-to-race KTM, and indeed our trustworthy RE three-wheelers. Not to forget Chetak electric scooters, which has been launched recently. But at the heart of this are a few values. The values around driving innovation through a fantastic R&D team, trying to find innovative go-to-market strategies like in exports and in electric vehicles, doing our work in the TPM way through a very well-knit supply chain team. All this brings together what we want to drive, which is be the best at what we do. And this is possibly a very good time to prove that now that the industry is pivoting towards the electric vehicles. And we hopefully will win there and continue to have the right on what we call ourselves the world's favorite Indian. Thanks a lot, Dun Bradstreet.
In the automobile industry, the organization that has come out all cylinders firing straight to the top, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Maruti Suzuki Limited. Where banking is revered and passion is practiced true to the name and mission. Let's clap away for everyone's favorite bank, the HDFC Bank. The sector that makes houses strong and walls indestructible. Their ads are a delight and their quality mighty. Let's congratulate Ultratech Cement with a huge round of applause. The company's managing director, Mr. Kailash Jhanwar, has shared a message for all of us. Well, moving on now, when it comes to the chemical sector, there is tough competition indeed. Pidilite Industries emerges as the clear winner and bags the trophy for 2021. The Infrastructure and Development Sector Award goes to the doyen of the industry, Larsen & Toubro. A thunderous applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Larsen & Toubro Limited, who make our world strong and easy. So let's listen to what whole-time Director and Senior Executive Vice President, Development Projects, Mr. Dip Kishore Sen has to say.
Hello everyone, sincere greetings from Larsen & Toubro Limited. Now this award of Dun & Bradstreet is extremely important for us. It's again a true recognition to L&T's reputation as a nation builder for last 8 decades. On behalf of my colleagues and most importantly on behalf of Mr. S. Subramanyam, our CEO and MD, I thank DNB for this honor and consider it my privilege to accept it with all the humbleness.
In the consumer durables and appliances category, many big names were in the race, but the one that's risen above the rest is a brand synonymous with quality and trust. Let's hear it for Voltas Limited, the buyer's favorite. Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Pradeep Bakshi, has a message for us.
It's an honor to be recognized as one of India's top 500 companies in the Dun Bradstreet Corporate Awards 2021. At Voltas, it has always been our endeavor to align our business ethos with the growth of the Indian economy. Thank you, Dun Bradstreet, for this recognition, and my heartfelt congratulations to all the prize winners today.
Well, the competition was tougher than tough in the electrical product segment, but the winner came through very clear. Let's all applaud Polycab India Limited, the champion of this sector. Moving to the fertilizer industry, their attention to quality and focus on output is exemplary. I'm sure we will hear plaudits from the audience as I invite the winner, Chambal Fertilizers and Chemicals Limited. FIs, NBFCs, financial services combined leaves us wondering who will be crowned king. Well, let's not keep you wondering anymore, ladies and gentlemen, because the winner is Housing Development and Finance Corporation Limited. The company's managing director, Ms. Renu Sood Karnar, has very kindly shared a message with us.
It's indeed a pleasure to be here today, virtually actually, and we're learning everything new these days, to accept this award on behalf of HDFC, which is in the FIs, NBFCs, and the financial services category. I'm really thankful to Dun Bradstreet for giving us this award, particularly now in these very difficult days during the pandemic.
The FMCG sector has many players running towards the trophy. So let's salute and applaud the toughest of them all. A big round of applause for Hindustan Unilever Limited. Food and beverages, well, my favorite sector for sure. Any guesses for the winner? Well, I won't keep you guessing any longer. It's none other than Nestle India Limited. In the gas processing, transmission, and marketing sector, one organization drove in top gear and crossed the finishing line with style and aplomb. Friends, please put your hands together for GAIL India Limited. Director Marketing, Mr. E.S. Ranganathan, has a short message for us.
At the outset, I thank you very much for the recognition. I am very much honored to receive this award on behalf of GAIL India Limited. We express our gratitude for this recognition and accept that award on behalf of my colleagues of GAIL with all humility and the faith that we will continue to work towards ensuring energy security to the nation and for the betterment of the life of our countrymen.
Now, the insurance sector has a strong reach. A name that has brought strength and stability into countless households deserves rousing applause. Well, it's none other than SBI Life Insurance Company Limited. Iron and steel resonates with strength, stability, and sustenance. The organization that embodies these values and is a clear winner is Tata Steel Limited. So let's hear it for them. In the oil refining and marketing segment, topping the charts is a mighty achievement. So friends, let's congratulate the master, Reliance Industries Limited. The pharmaceuticals industry, its value more known now than ever, touches each life through ever-growing excellence in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of diseases. The one name that reigns supreme, Sun Pharmaceuticals Industries Limited, indeed deserves an unstoppable ovation. Let's listen to what the company's Chief Financial Officer, Mr. C.S. Muralidharan, has to say.
On behalf of Sun Pharma, I am pleased to accept the Dun Bradstreet Corporate Award 2021. The last 1.5 years has been very challenging for all of us. This award actually belongs to the 36,000 strong global workforce of Sun Pharma. We feel privileged to receive this award. I want to thank the jury at Dun Bradstreet for bestowing this honor on Sun Pharma. Thank you.
Power, the word itself, evokes majesty. Sailing through and sitting right at the top is NTPC Limited. Congratulations. Power equipment, now be it home or business, power equipment is needed everywhere. So let's give it up for the undisputed leader, Kalpataru Power Transmission Limited. Moving on now to the retail segment, the modern India's favorite retail store that has reigned undisputed. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause for Avenue Supermarts Limited. Process automation helps organizations identify and eliminate bottlenecks, control company costs, and add efficiencies. Well, the winner in the software and BPM segment is definitely the most deserving. Tata Consultancy Services Limited. Ms. Rajshri R., Chief Marketing Officer, has shared a message with us.
Everyone, I would like to thank Dun & Bradstreet for recognizing TCS among India's top 500 companies as part of the Corporate Awards for 2021. I'm humbled to accept this award on behalf of the 500,000 TCSers across the world. This has been a difficult year for all of us. I'm really proud about the resiliency and the passion shown by my colleagues across the world, while continuing to grow and keep our customers happy. Again, I would like to thank Dun & Bradstreet for this honor, and all the best to everyone. Thank you so much.
Well, it's time to announce the winner of the sweetest segment, the sugar industry. The award goes to Balrampur Chini Mills Limited. Well, the last award in this segment is for the textile industry. Now, here's a clue. You knit it, loop it, or weave it. You bind the threads and give it. Please join me in congratulating Welspun India Limited. The company's CEO and Joint Managing Director, Ms. Dipali Goenka, has a message for us.
Thank you, everyone. We're delighted to have been recognized by Dun & Bradstreet for this prestigious award. Welspun India is glad to be declared winner as a top company in the textile industry. Welspun India remains committed in its long-term aspiration of delivering sustainable and profitable volume-led growth while building strong brand equity.
Now that brings us to the end of the sector-based awards categories. It's time now to move on to our next segment, the Growth Performance-Based Awards. Growth signals progress, and the awards for this segment are no different. So let's begin. The first award category is the Best Growth Performance in Banks. Well, when we talk about banking strength, a truly bankable performance has come from Bandhan Bank Limited. So let's hear it for Bandhan Bank, ladies and gentlemen. The Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Chandrasekhar Ghosh, has a message for us.
I'd like to thank you, Dun & Bradstreet, for the award for Best Growth Performance Banks as a part of India's top 500 companies.
I accept this award on behalf of my 50,000 employees and 2.5 crores of the customer.
Our next award category is Best Growth Performance Chemicals. Composition or characteristic properties, this name has it all. Shining through with incredible growth numbers is Deepak Nitrite Limited. CEO and Executive Director Mr. Maulik Mehta wants to share a message with us.
At the outset, I would like to say thank you, and I'm honored to have received this award. I would like to thank the dignitaries, the Dun & Bradstreet team, and also the council jury members for bestowing this very prestigious award. As a company, we have retained the policy of people, planet, profit in that order.
The next award is for Best Growth Performance, Construction Infrastructure Development. Better infrastructure means better connections for a growing economy. And PNC Infratech Limited takes it all. So let's hear a big round of applause for PNC Infratech Limited. Next in line is the award for Best Growth Performance, Engineering Projects, Capital Goods. Sustainable growth, investments, and competitive performances has made this organization the emerging winner. So let's congratulate Rights Limited with a huge round of applause. We have a message shared by the company's former CMD, Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra, who retired on 30th of June 2021.
Thank you, Dun & Bradstreet and the jury for recognizing our efforts through this award. While we predominantly remain a consulting company, our initiatives in last 10 years to diversify into locomotive leasing, exports to new countries, power management and turnkey execution of contracts have given us a robust growth in 10 years. I'm grateful to Dun & Bradstreet for recognizing this effort of Rights. This will go a long way in boosting the morale of the officers, and they are capable of taking this further. Thank you.
Best Growth Performance, FIs, NBFCs, Financial Services, goes to the harbinger of good news for many across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for the loved entity across cities, Bajaj Finance Limited. Moving on to the best growth performance, food and beverages. Topping the chart in this sector is the organizational giant whose strides match global leaps. It's none other than Tata Consumer Products Limited. The award for Best Growth Performance, Pharmaceuticals, goes to the organization that has shown us sales, annual growth, and high to low value generics. Defining popularity, empathy, and awesomeness. Please welcome our hero, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories Limited. Our next category is Best Growth Performance Power, be it coal or renewable energy. This organization has redefined the industrial outlook. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for SJVN Limited. In the Best Growth Performance Software and BPM category, we have a champion whose journey is mapped by spurring growth. Friends, it's time to reserve our best applause for the leader in their class. Congratulations, Coforge Limited. Arriving now, ladies and gentlemen, at the finale, the ESG Related Awards. The first category of awards is ESG Performance Manufacturing. Maintaining a competitive advantage and thriving into the future seems to be a keynote of this industrial stalwart. Tata Chemicals Limited is the clear winner. The company's Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Nandakumar S. Thirumalai, has a message for us.
On behalf of Tata Chemicals, I would like to thank the jury members, esteemed dignitaries, and DNB for declaring Tata Chemicals as a winner under the ESG Performance category, Manufacturing, at the DNB India's Top 500 Corporate Awards 21. Tata Chemicals is committed to supporting the society through science-led intervention with a human touch. As a responsible company, care for the environment and community has always been at the core of everything we do.
The second award category is ESG Performance Services. Ladies and gentlemen, this award goes to Persistent Systems Limited because their continuous performance has carved their journey to the top. So they definitely deserve a big roar. It's time to tune in now to their company's founder, chairman, and managing director, Dr. Anand Deshpande, as he says a few words.
I'd like to thank Dun Bradstreet for recognizing Persistent Systems as a top 500 company in India in the ESG Performance category for services. ESG has been a core part of Persistent's culture for the last 30 years. I'd like to thank Persistent Foundation for putting in the necessary support for environmental and social activities for the company.
The award for ESG Performance Financial Services goes to the organization that has kept ESG at its core and stayed true to the root values. Let's hear a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for HDFC Asset Management Company Limited. Let's tune into the company's Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Navneet Munnu.
My sincere thanks to Dun & Bradstreet for recognizing our commitment and efforts towards ESG. I accept this award on behalf of the team at SDFC AMC. SDFC Group has always been associated with high levels of social responsibility, ethical business practices, and a strong governance oversight. At SDFC AMC, we inherit that culture, we inherit those values, and operate with a shared mindset that sustainability goals are part of the financial goals. Once again, thank you so much for recognizing our efforts.
Wow, the awards and the winners are definitely an inspiration for many future winners. Ladies and gentlemen, as we inch towards the closure of the event, I'd like to remind you to please visit the virtual stalls of Dun & Bradstreet and our event partners before you leave. Also, your feedback is highly valuable to us, so do give in your feedback by clicking the menu button on the homepage. Before we end, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend our gratitude to our distinguished guests and speakers for offering their experiences, perspectives, and motivation for us to imbibe and grow. So a big thank you is extended to our guest of honor, Dr. Vivek Debrai, our special guest, Dr. Krishnamurthy Subramanyam, Mr. Neeraj Sahai, President, Dun & Bradstreet International, Mr. Avinash Gupta, Managing Director and CEO, India, Dun & Bradstreet, Mr. Sridhar Pinaporedi, Founder and Chairman, CtrlS and Cloud4C Services Private Limited, our special dignitaries, Mr. Richard Morgan, Regional Managing Director, West and Central Asia, Maersk, and Ms. Rakhi Kumar, SVP, Sustainability Solutions, Liberty Mumbai Insurance. Thank you, leaders, for sharing your valuable time with us at this grand event. We also thank our event partners, our title partner, CtrlS and Cloud4C, our life insurance partner, Life Insurance Corporation of India, our co-partners, Equity Ratings and Research Limited, and Sodexo SVC India Private Limited. Our branding partners, National Mineral Development Corporation and NTT Data Business Solutions Private Limited, and all of our publication partners. Last but not the least, a big thank you to each and every one of you for joining in and making this event a success. As I said earlier, there are some interesting products that could help your company differentiate and remain competitive before logging off. So please visit our stalls. One last gentle reminder before we close, please do share your thoughts about this event on social media platforms and do not forget to use the hashtags #DNB Top 500 and #DNB Corporate Awards. Your feedback is very important to us, ladies and gentlemen, so do leave us a note on your experience and you should be hearing from us very soon. Therefore, we request you to please share your feedback with us by clicking on the feedback icon on the sliding menu bar. Lastly, we also have a briefcase feature in the menu bar, where you can preview and download company, product, and services information about Dun & Bradstreet. We may have had a rough year, ladies and gentlemen, but a better future awaits, I'm sure, for all of us. This future comprises no-code, point, and click tools, AI, and so much more. It's not the strongest that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are the most adaptable to change. With this note, this is me, Suchitra Pillai, your host for today, saying thank you, and I'm signing off now.